let's take a look at a model response to an English Language Paper 1 question 3 question on analyzing structure. Okay, so analyzing structure, as we've talked about in previous videos, we take the cool spider approach to our annotations, or if that is a little bit too complex, we just go with our core features, and the core, that is any contrasts that we can see. It is the opening and the ending, and it is anything which has been repeated. Okay, we pick that because that allows us to have a key foundation for things to say. So the core of the structure can at least be explored. So the extract that we were given is an extract from White Teeth by Zadie Smith. And in the extract, we meet Darcus Bowden. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but we meet Darcus Bowden. We also meet Hortense. These are essentially the parental figures of Clara, who is the main character in the story. And Darcus is an odoriferous, moribund, salivating old man entombed in a bug-infested armchair, whereas Hortense is an incredibly fiery, outspoken person, and steam was something that she had in abundance, and she gives Darcus a piece of her mind, brings Clara along, and that kind of lays the foundation for the story. So it's very early on in the novel. There's lots of repetition of the word humph. That's all Darcus ever says, and Hortense, on the other hand, speaks a lot, and at the moment she is preparing for the end of the world. Okay, so that's just a quick rundown of the text. You can obviously pause this and read it in detail so you know how to approach it. Now, the core observations, so remember, core is contrasts, opening, repetition, and the end. This is what I found when I was going through. So some contrast, we've got Darcus's lethargy versus Hortense's fire. Okay, so he is a very quiet, lazy, depressed individual, whereas Hortense is incredibly outspoken and fiery, as I said before. Okay, then we have the opening, which is where Darcus, his general state of being, the foundation is laid for that, in contrast with the much more energetic end of the world prep that it ends with. And throughout, we have a lot of the story carried by the slightly humorous repetition of humph from Darcus in his lethargy. Okay, so that was the kind of the foundations of analyses that I found, and that's what I want to talk about when it comes to my essay response. So here's my first paragraph. First paragraph, the writer immediately positions us as readers. So I should say that the question basically says, how has the writer structured the text to engage you as a reader? Okay, so hence the first person, us, okay, is how does it engage you as a reader, or indeed all readers? Okay, so the writer immediately positions us as readers. So it is how we have been targeted by the writer. So we've got reference to the writer doing something and the effect that it has on us as readers. Okay, so the opening clause clearly lays the foundation for saying, hey, examiner, I'm doing AO1 in as much as I'm answering your question. The word immediately gives a clue that this is about the opening of the story. Okay, so immediately positions with an opening, blah, blah, blah. Okay, then we talk about the impact of that. A position of judgmental observers with an opening that focuses on the failings of Darcus Bowden as a person, intriguing us and making us feel superior. So note, engaging you as a reader, we need to think about what is the impact that is generated by the writer's structural choices. Then we have the first sentence. So again, another clear signpost to the examiner that I'm talking about structural things. Okay, first sentence. Then we talk about surplus, which means we have too many of something. surplus of pejorative adjectives and appended clauses, so that's where we stick stuff onto the end, detailing his inertia, amounting to an epic 40 words. Notice that all of these things are talking about structure. Prepares us to expect, okay, so now we're talking about the effect of the reader, prepares us to expect nothing more than bug-infested armchair dwelling from him, no dynamism, okay? Notice that I think that this student wanted to make sure that they were quoting something, okay? This quotation is nothing to do with the structure, but they clearly wanted to include some quotations, even though they've made references to the first sentence and how long it is, very specifically with 40 words. That is enough in terms of references for structural points. You don't have to be quoting, but it's nice to drop in a few illustrative quotations as you go, particularly when relevant. Okay, so a really strong opening paragraph. This is all about the reader in orange, how it is created with the opening in green, so these structural features that have been generated. Pejorative adjectives is technically a language point, but I've slotted them in anyway. So you're not going to lose marks for mentioning language, particularly when you talk about the surplus of something. So how many of these pejorative or insulting adjectives we find. That's kind of what the focus is of. It's how many there are rather than the fact that they are insulting. Okay, so the pejorative and the fact that they're adjectives is less relevant than the surplus of this thing. That's the structural point. Then we move on to the second paragraph, and notice it has been connected to the previous paragraph with such an impression to show that we are building our argument. Okay, so strong AO1, and it links impression, links to the question asking about how effects are achieved on us as readers. Then we have got a nice little reference to contrast. Okay, so contrast, blah, blah, opposite, antithesis, and then the writer placing them next to each other. All of that is our structural terminology to show that that's what we're talking about. Then we think about the effects on the reader. Okay, so an impression, that's an effect on the reader. We're initially aligned in our distaste for Darkus. Okay. We've got the so this is obviously the important thing is kind of linking it to what the reader has as an experience, but it's carried through these quotations. So we have his lethargy and her steam, his slumping deeper into the recesses of his chair and her tongue whipping unleashed. Okay, so notice that each time when I'm doing a contrast, I have two quotes for each one. Okay, so linking my quotations together. Okay, so this is Darkus and this is Hortense. This is Darkus and this is Hortense. Okay, so anytime we're doing contrast or antithesis, we need to provide a pairing of quotations to show that contrast. And then we talk about the effect that has. Serves to enhance their characterization, making Darkus more reticent and Hortense more fiery by the writer placing them next to each other. And that is the impression that is generated. And then we've got our final paragraph of structural analysis. We've got, we're opening again with indeed. So we're connecting our paragraphs together. We're building an overall argument. You don't have to do that, but it's a nice flourish. And then we think, again, what are we looking at? The structural feature on this occasion is the repetition. And then we think, how many times? 4 times. And then we've got the quotations that are being used. Humph. Because it is repetition of the word humph, we don't need to say humph, 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 humph. We can just say humph 4 times. Okay? So that's how we make a reference when it's something that is a direct repetition. Then we're talking about the effect that is created. So the character's contrast, entertaining for us as readers. And so that contrast, blah, 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 entertain us as readers who are unbalanced like neither of them, neither haughty nor decrepit. Okay, so the reader's experience is really relevant in this particular question. And then at the end, you'll notice that it doesn't have to be a fresh paragraph of conclusion. But this word overall is quite a nice way of rounding off a mini essay response like this, talking about how we're interested as readers, and then talking about what we've talked about, contrast, and the sense of superiority that comes from it. Okay, so a really strong, this would obviously be a full marks response, a really strong structural analysis that takes the core features, so contrasts, opening, repetition, and the end. And in fact, you'll notice we didn't even get to this one because we had enough to talk about with the first three things, which is why Cool Spider is a great approach to use, Cool Spider, because it gives you loads of things that you could possibly talk about. However, core is usually going to be enough. So you don't need to find everything from Cool Spider because core is usually going to be enough to talk about for how long the response has to be, which realistically doesn't need to be more than 3 paragraphs in general because you're not getting a whole bunch of marks for this question. Hope that was helpful, guys.